Episode 16 of More Than Just Maps. I'm your host, Ollie Powers. This podcast was created with the intent to help anyone in the GIS field get from where they are now to where they want to be that your first job, a career move, or just improving your GIS game overall. On today's episode, I conclude my interview with Caitlyn McNabb and Micah Babinsky. With 2020 being what it was, this special episode of the podcast deals with the topic of burnout. Caitlyn, Micah, and I all discuss some of the challenges we've faced recently and how and what we've done to overcome our own bouts of burnout. Welcome back to our next episode of More Than Just Maps. I'm back with Micah and Caitlyn for part 2 of our interview. So now, how we first got these two guests on the show, Caitlyn, you actually wrote a really fantastic article about burnout. And when I read it, I had just started recovering from my own episode of burnout. And your article resonated with me more than you can imagine. And we started talking, and then we got Mike on the mix. And so we came up, we wanted to actually do an episode about burnout and just how this affects us and how you get through it, how you recover from it. It's a huge problem right now, especially with 2020. It existed well before that, but I think 2020 has accelerated it for a lot of people. So, Caitlyn, do you want to just start, you don't have to go into super detail, but just some of the things that you experienced with your own burnout?
Sure, yeah. I wrote that article, I started writing that article a year ago.
Oh my gosh.
And I was so hesitant to post it because I was with a different company and I felt like it would reflect poorly on me or the company itself. So I held on to it. I have a list of all these articles that I've been wanting to write, and I just haven't because I felt uncomfortable sharing that and finding the right platform to share it on as well. Right around the time I finished that article, I had a career change. Not only I was with a new company, but now a completely new discipline. I work for a software company now. I'm not working with surveyors. So it was as I was coming up on that 1-year anniversary, and I finally had a moment, thankfully because of COVID, to sit and reflect on everything that had happened in the past year, or even 5 or 10 years. I really just felt that I needed to write that and put it out there because I know that I couldn't have been the only person experiencing that. I gave you a little bit of background, but essentially it started with my back injury, and I had back surgery when I started my PhD. And I had essentially gone straight from undergrad to master's to PhD, and I had moved from Texas to Louisiana to Washington for my education. And all of a sudden I had to leave, and all these years that I'd spent sinking into something that I'm really passionate about where it felt useless. And then I found this niche, right? This GIS and surveying, and it was very appropriate considering my background that I fell into that kind of career path. But because I came from academia, I always felt like I was behind because I hadn't been educated in it, right? I hadn't been taught. I didn't know all there was to know about the field, and no one ever does, and I never will.
I was about to say, nobody's ever going to know. Even the GIS, the fathers of GIS are not going to know everything ever.
Right. But when I'm working on something, whether it's archaeology or an article or, just a problem that I'm thinking about, I almost have to visualize it in my hand, like an apple or something that I'm turning over and looking and seeing all the different pieces, right? Or Rubik's Cube is probably a better analogy there. And so I spent, 5-7 years of my career feeling like I was behind, pushing. I also my gender was in the minority at every company I've ever worked at. So not only that, but I felt like I had to prove myself even more than my male counterparts.
Again, no pressure, right?
Right. So luckily I have, the discipline from academia to, teach myself, sit down, learn, do all the MOOCs, do all the trainings, get involved with professional organizations. I knew how strategically to progress. And in the past year or two, I've really gotten to the point where, at my last company, I was the director of GIS. And I got to the point where I was like, I've achieved and achieved and achieved, and I have no hobbies, and I'm tired all the time, and I'm sick all the time. And, switching to this new career hasn't been easy by any means, but I now get to work with other GIS professionals that are so intelligent and so passionate about what they do and about making sure that our customers are getting what they need out of us. What is the book, The Servant Leadership? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Like that kind of mentality when it comes to interacting with people, which is something that's very much in line with my outlook. And finally being in this place where I'm not in a vacuum and I'm not just constantly push, learn, achieve, allowed me to realize that I was, my priorities were very much out of sync with the life that I envisioned for myself. Now, I'm not saying that approach to your career and that approach to life is wrong by any means. It is definitely the way I lived my life for many years. But I just had this, and again, it comes down to COVID in 2020 and essentially being forced to sit still and just reflect, make sure that your priorities are in order. That's when I realized, I'm really suffering from burnout. So I wrote that article and published it, and I was sick to my stomach for days. And I actually had several of my coworkers reach out to me, which was like just my worst nightmare, because that's why I didn't publish it in the first place. And every single one of them was so supportive. From people reaching out to say, hey, are you okay? To people reaching out to say, hey, I'm feeling the same way in my own company, or I've been there and it gets better. You'll come through it.
I can relate to the worst nightmare of your coworkers finding it. When we started the podcast, I didn't really tell anybody at my office that I had started it. And one of my coworkers found it one day, and I went into this introversion hell where I just wouldn't talk to anybody the rest of the day. So I totally understand that.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about being introverted and being in a leadership position with Urissa, because I've got stories to share with you there. But yeah, so my coworkers found this. And then every Friday we have this team huddle. Sometimes somebody's presenting a new technique or something they learned. Sometimes it's just a question of the day, kind of a team building type of thing. And of course, that Friday after I published it, our topic of conversation at the Friday call was burnout. And I was just, again, mortified. But it was some of the best advice that I ever received. And everyone has a slightly different approach. And I need to write a summary article from all the different people that reached out to me and gave me advice or anecdotes about their experience with it. But that bit of advice that, just bring who you are to work. It's okay to, some people say, oh, you need to have this work-life balance and there needs to be separation. And then the other side of that, some of the other advice I got was you're here because you love what you do. It's okay that the lines are blurred, right? You don't need to feel guilty about that. Just a whole range of advice that came from that meeting, and the support that was there, and the camaraderie, right? That I'm not in this alone. And many of them were like, yeah, I burned out at this job in this company, and it's okay. You'll get through it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that's my experience with burnout.
Yeah, it's often the scariest things that we do that bring about the best rewards. And that's super generalizing it, but I have to agree with everything you said, and just it's tough. It's real tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Micah, how about you? And you've had a crazy story too.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know about that. I do want to say though, Caitlin, you should definitely publish that compilation of your accrued wisdom from just all your conversations, because that's been that would be super interesting. But I guess if I talk about my brush or brushes with burnout, I mean, it's really, I think about, like, especially if you're like, you're early in your career, there's just sort of this natural excitement. It's like you're falling in love. Hopefully with GIS, people aren't like, usually are pretty into it. They're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. What great technology. I'm solving problems. I'm meeting lots of interesting, quirky people. And there's this sort of this buzz you get. And then you sort of go up, and then it's like, you sort of learn like what the phrase day in, day out, like what that really looks like when you're contemplating, let's be honest, most of us, this day and age, a 40+ year career. And it's just like, okay, so this is just it. I'm gonna go to work. Usually it's like in an office setting. There's always gonna be the petty office politics. There's always gonna be the people that you have friction with, the bureaucracy, if you work in government or in the corporate world. And there's just always things that are not gonna live up to those expectations. And the job that I had most recently, before my current gig, it was like, I was there for 4.5 years, and it was the longest time I'd ever worked at a place. And, I have so much gratitude for everything that I learned there, just the talented, funny, friendly people that I worked with. It was just, sometimes it felt like a slog. And I guess, I struggled with, and I don't blame anyone for this. This was my thing. I struggled connecting the day-to-day work that I had to do. And this could be, it could be digitizing GIS data, it could be writing reports, whatever sort of, it could be developing software, whatever sort of work that you do, it can start to feel like a grind. And I struggled to keep my motivation going sometimes. And I think that was because, like, I would lose sight of, like, okay, so I finished this, like, we'd call it like a data improvement plan. And what is the impact of this really going to be? And
I think that's a really common, I know, I don't think I had full on burnout at that point, but I've definitely felt that before in jobs. Like, what is the point of doing this?
Yes.
Why
yes.
am I trading my time for money to do this?
Yep. And I think it's a shared responsibility. In a perfect world, the employee would have the curiosity, or just like the self, I don't know what you call it, the just the inspiration to say, like, okay, even if this is a grind, I know that my work matters. And I have confidence that the work I'm doing is important because I'm a professional, and I know that what I'm doing is going to have an impact. But then that responsibility is also shared from the manager or the leader. And if there's any managers or leaders, listening, I would just say, do whatever you can. If your employee is you see them grinding on something, just tell them, look, I see that you're working hard at this, and it is having an impact, even if it doesn't feel like it, at 4 p.m. on a Friday when you've just had a terrible week and you want to go home. And so, without going into too much specifics, I got sort of frustrated. I got angry even, and developed some unhealthy ways of coping with that stress and that frustration. And, I was job searching for a long time, and I developed a real sort of resentment towards I started to worry, what if I can't get another job? Why don't people want to have me on their team. And it's some of the best advice that I got, for dealing with that. Well, first of all, what Caitlyn said, just to open up, to get it off your chest, whether that's with a trusted colleague or friend or with the broader community. I mean, it's really great the more that we can talk about this as a profession, the better for everyone. So that's one thing, is to open up. And then the other thing is just, you can do what you can do. You can engage with the process of improving your work situation, getting the promotion, getting the new job, whatever you think is going to improve your situation. But then once you've done what you can do, it's just about letting go. And there's no easy way to figure out how to let go when you're not happy and you're frustrated. There's tons of books out there about that. There's whole, there's self-help groups, there's whole systems of thought around that. But yeah, that's just what it took, really. And, and I was unemployed for for 4.5 months and really struggled. And so, yeah. And now I'm even exploring, looking at getting into cybersecurity, because it's something else I've been interested in. And, but I love GIS. I'm working for a great company and a great GIS job now. So yeah, so to be willing to share, to be willing to unburden yourself, to try to find that that serenity, that acceptance with whatever, when you've done what you can do, you got to let go sometimes. And then just to stay curious and find what it is that connects, the day-to-day of what you're doing to how you're helping someone's life or, improving someone's situation. It's hard to do.
It is very difficult to do. Just in my own experience with burnout, everything piled up and then it hit a boiling point, and I didn't want to do anything at all. And I kept forcing myself to be engaged, to be involved in things. Especially when you're the president of a HRSA chapter, that's difficult, and you're expected to be doing all these things, and you're sitting there before a meeting going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do any of this, but pushing yourself through it anyways. I think that was a detriment to myself, and I think I should have. Hindsight's always 20/20. I wish I had taken the time off and just said, things are out of control. I need some time away. I need to rest. I need to recover. And that would have put a little bit of a burden on everyone else. But I kind of wish I had done that, and maybe I could have recovered a little bit quicker. It's tough. It's tough when something that used to fire you up so much and you had such passion for, suddenly you're just like, I don't want to do anything. I also ended up losing my job during the pandemic this year, which was really, really tough. In 2020, it's tough. It's tough to lose a job. And I remember looking for my new job. I was really lucky to find something quickly, but before I found something, I remember sitting on the couch one night talking to my husband. He's like, what do you want to do? I sat there and was like, nothing. I don't want to work anymore, which is not really an option. But sometimes that's just what it comes down to. So thankfully now things are not as dire as they were before. The passion I had was still there, but I just didn't have the energy to act on it. And I'm starting to get that energy back now, which is a huge relief to me. How did you guys feel when you were in the depths of kind of burnout? How was your energy levels, and how did you keep kind of hiding what was happening?
I was very much tired all the time. And it's funny, my husband's like, you sleep 12 hours a day because I would work and then come home and watch TV or play a video game with him. And he'd look over and I'd be passed out. And with 2020 being what it's been, I think he finally understands what was happening, which is just my body was like, you know what? I'm not dealing with anything else today, so I'm turning off. It was somebody hit the power button and that was it.
Yeah.
And again, to echo what you said, which is things that I was really passionate about, I'm just not passionate about it anymore. And part of that is, again, reflecting on my priorities and getting those in order. So my my passions, which I thought were passions, were really misplaced priorities. But a lot of them are because I am just burnt out. Like I just don't have the capacity to put anything towards them right now.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm currently in the throes of burnout. And as I'm working through that, I think learning to say, that's okay. And
Yes.
what Micah was saying about, perspective and like, now what do I do now? It's okay to not have a next step. But again, being on that path in academia where you're always looking to the next step.
Yeah.
Really kind of messed that up for me to be able to say, it's okay to not know what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, so for me, I mean, I'm trying to think, it's been such a difficult year, looking back towards, my job ending and then the strain that pandemics put on us. But I think, that stretch of being unemployed, I was looking at like the job boards, like from the moment my eyes open until the moment they closed.
That
And
is exhausting right by itself. That
yeah,
is, people think you're not working, you're just like, oh, whatever. No, it is the most exhausting thing ever.
yeah, I couldn't, and I struggled to slow down and and some of the best times that I had honestly was like hanging out with my son, just because he's so in the moment, we go for a walk or something and he wants to like stop and pick up a stick and hit a bush with it. And it was like, that was some of the best times because it was like, he was forcing me to slow down and like be in the moment. But yeah, it's just hard and this could be at work or if you're unemployed, just when you feel like your happiness and your mental well-being is so out of your own control. Like I would get an interview or a second interview and, oh boy, I'm really excited now. And then, or if you get a no thank you on something you were really excited about, then it was like, oh God, all sorts of curse words coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, just trying to keep it together. And it was tough, but just doing the things like we've been talking about. It's like reaching out, asking for help and checking in with yourself. And then I think just when those feelings bubble up, whether it's fear, frustration, insecurity, is like, sometimes there's no off switch for that. And like, sometimes I just need to go to bed, like what Caitlin's talking about. And then also just acknowledge, say, you know what, I feel really crappy right now. And just sometimes by acknowledging it, you hope it can kind of disarm it a little bit, that the hurt that those feelings can lead to.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of research out there that shows that people who, I don't know the right term for it, but you take your control of your happiness for yourself. You're not letting external factors determine whether you're going to be happy or sad. People who can do that, they're much better at dealing when life throws us these curveballs.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, I think a lot of people haven't had to really deal with that. Things have been pretty smooth sailing. And this year has shaken that up for a whole bunch of people. Where you're not dealing with one curveball, you're dealing with 500 curveballs. So this has just been kind of, I think, a big wake-up call for everybody where we're kind of sitting there going, okay, the pieces are on the ground now. We're no longer juggling them. What do we do? And I think this is not a whole lot of good things happen this year, but I think it's a good opportunity for everyone to kind of figure out like, okay, how do I take this? Things are going to happen and things are going to continue to happen, whether they're good or bad, whether it's 2021 or 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we get ourselves to where all these external factors are not going to make us question our own self-worth to ourselves?
Yes. And whatever your baseline was, going into March or April of 2020, it was like whatever your baseline of life difficulty was, it was a tidal wave for sure.
I think that before this year, that at least in my experience, there's kind of this culture of the social media of always, looking to see what the Joneses are doing, right? And and, you know, LinkedIn is definitely a place for that as well, which I would consider a very professional place, but also kind of like, why is she doing so much better than I am? Or why is he, you know, succeeding faster than I am? Right.
Yep.
And then even like in real life, what, you know, when you're going out with friends or whatever, there's, I don't know how to explain it or really put my finger on it, but it's just kind of this feeling of like what I have or what I'm doing isn't good enough compared to what somebody else is doing.
Yeah, that's a tough
Right?
one. There's so many moments where I feel like I'm never enough. And then my friends will look at me and be like, look at everything you're doing. You're insane. And I'm still going, I'm not enough. And they think I'm crazy and I still think I'm failing.
And I think, you know, again, there's so many difficult aspects to this year. But again, it's given me time to sit there and realize these kind of unhealthy habits that I had. You know, I'm running my own race and tending my own garden. And as long as I am happy with myself and happy with what I'm doing, then it doesn't matter if I'm achieving as quickly as that other person is, or as the person who I was previously was doing. You know, it's okay that I'm not that way anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one, is knowing what you used to do and even just, they say the only race you should run is against yourself, but even that can be a detriment, because I mean, I played 4 different sports when I was in high school. I was in the best shape of my life in high school. I'm not in high school anymore. There's no way I can do that stuff anymore.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was just thinking, like, post back surgery, I tried to go back and do the things that I could do pre back surgery. I played volleyball. I was a scuba diver. I kayaked. I hiked, you know, so many different things. And I, you know, was released from PT and was like, okay, gonna go do all the things I did before, and everything breaks down. So it's like, it's very similar to this, you know, when people come out of this giant pause that 2020 has been, right? And they hit play again, I hope that the people who are struggling with burnout or self-worth or whatever we're going to term it, I hope that those people don't feel like they have to go straight back to the way things were before, that they don't have to be the same person that they were before 2020. So anyways, that's interesting that you said that.
I would agree. I think a lot of people are going to just try to spring back, and I don't know that things are going to just spring back to the way they were before.
I hope that there'll be a realignment. You know, people will refocus on some of the priorities, things like what Caitlyn's been talking about, and check in with themselves. Because, yeah, it's definitely thrown into relief some of the problems with our workplace culture and the demands put, you know, especially on like, on what we look at, a lot of folks who fall into that essential worker category. I think some of this, just like this podcast, you know, some of these topics are they're gaining more prominence just in our shared consciousness, for sure.
And even though this wasn't super GIS related, this is still a topic that affects everyone in the GIS industry, and it's important to discuss it and just say, hey, you're not alone, because I can't imagine the number of people who do think they are alone, and they're the only ones who are dealing with this and suffering with this, and that's not true at all.
No doubt.
Well, Micah, Caitlyn, thank you so much for joining me today for the show. This was a blast. We could talk forever about this. I'm sure we all have a ton of information we could share, but I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie.
Great. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.